So it's quite wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for your presence. Thank you to my wonderful hosts. I was at Abhayagiri when a few people from Portland came down to talk about the thought of having a home for Portland Friends of the Dhamma. And then I was here when the opening occurred, and I called it the magic carpet up here. It was just absolutely covered with Sangha, a lot of them Ajahns. And then I came up in a U-Haul truck with Debbie Stamp, who's one of the foundation members, starting support for the monastery before a monastery even was there at Abhayagiri. And we brought the Buddha up. And that was quite a day. It was raining, it was freezing cold, and the Buddha did not want to come up the steps. And it took, I reckon it took a couple of hours, and everyone was cold, and different people had different ideas of, it was very, very heavy, of course, but the angle was just very tricky. So I remember when we got it in place, Ajahn Jeff was very patiently waiting in here in order to do some chanting when the Buddha was placed up here on the stage. So I'm enormously grateful that a place like this exists and that you, as a group of very sincere people wanting to follow a path or wanting to meditate or gathering together to bring forces of goodness and calm and peace, especially right now. I think that's very, very important. I'm not used to being on a stage. The last time I was on a stage, I think I was 10 years old. I had a roll collar shift with sleeveless shift, height of fashion, singing Bebopaloopa with a school friend in a concert. So I'm used to being down there. So I have had the enormous good fortune to spend a lot of time at Abhayagiri. I arrived in 2011 for a 5-week stay and stayed for 6.5 years. And I keep coming back. I came back last year for 3 months and this year for 3 months. And but the journey for me goes back quite a long way. I was quite disillusioned as a child, and I've actually, talked to numbers of people meditating and curious about how to live a life of calm and clarity and wisdom. And they often, as a child, were wondering, like, what are we doing? I was like, well, why would you do this? You get up every day, for me, go to school, you do the same old things, not much inspiring or interesting in it. And my mother was a solo mum, and it wasn't easy at all. She was going to work every day, so I was like, this doesn't really make any sense. And because I wanted meaning, I wanted purpose, I wanted something that I could really give myself to. And also as a child, and I know lots of other people that do this too, I would go off into the sand dunes or into the forest, and I'm very kinesthetic, so I feel my way around in life. And I'd find a quiet spot, find a quiet spot, and I'd sit often at the foot of a tree. And I wouldn't necessarily call it meditating, but I'd say that there was an ambience and a calm serenity in nature that I felt like I'd just marinate and absorb into. So when I was backpacking, I was about 20, there was another significant event. I'm not going to talk about myself all the time, but just to give context for those who don't know. 16 years old, I was interestingly at a Hatha yoga class, and in 1972 it was like way out, a cult, must be really strange, led by a 78-year-old man who was dressed in a Hindu sannyasi orange kind of robes. This is at the YMCA. I'm like, go figure, But anyway, when we were doing the yoga nidra, so the last part with the relaxation, he would talk about things linked to Indian spirituality. And lying there, I would go, okay, I have to go to India. 16 years old. So it was, by the time I had a long overseas trip, people of my generation, Kiwi, Australian, you often put a pack on your back and you're away for years because we're so far away, there's this world out here, but, you don't know what it is. And I've always learned by the doing. So I did make it to India, and when you're doing, I don't know if any of you have done that, but you're always running into people and they're saying, oh, you should do this, So they said, oh, you should go to this place called Bodh Gaya. And I'm like, where is that? I was traveling with a good Kiwi friend, man. Went, oh, okay. And then when you go there, you should stay at the Japanese temple because it's really good accommodation. Really nice, very clean. And the only thing you have to do if you stay at the Japanese temple is attend the meditation at 4 a.m, and then you've got this wonderful accommodation. And we're like, oh, that sounds really good. And I tell you, at 4 a.m, sitting just behind the Japanese monks, with this big, huge, one of those really large gongs, boom, I was like, home, really, home. And I know I've spoken to other people who have something like that happened. And so, I did retreats mainly in the Mahasi Burmese tradition, which if you know anything about that, it's pretty intense, can be pretty intense, but it can be very, very beneficial as well for meditation. But for me, I'm not saying everywhere, but for me, it didn't teach me many, many things that are foundational, I think, for this journey that we're all on, whatever we may want to call it. I would probably call it a journey towards calm, peace, wisdom, clarity, harmony, and community. So, and at those retreats, that retreat-style experience, given that it can be really, really helpful, but it doesn't help me for community of other practitioners, because those retreats, you don't read, you're not meant to look at the other person, you're just very mindfully, often at the pace of a snail, which can also be really good. I don't want to sound like I benefited a lot, but I didn't find that there was much that was transferable from that experience out into my life, particularly around people. And, the interpersonal aspect of our living can be where a lot comes up, aversions, moods, reactions, things that we can find challenging. So it was when I think I've been doing a PhD in grief as well, because my second husband, was diagnosed with brain tumor, and it took about 2 years of that journey to pass away. So there was the enormous amount of grief in that. But after he passed away, it wasn't long at all before I found myself on staff in a retreat center, going to Burma, going to the Sagaing Hills to a Buddhist monastery led by a sayadaw, and getting really sick. And these Asia stories are, this seems to me often, really very, very helpful, and then often a lot of health challenges. I'm not good at having a brick for a pillow. I'm not good at sitting on a concrete floor. I'm not good at some of the food, spiciness or whatever. But it all was interesting because I got really sick on that time, 2006, found myself back home and looked online, back home in New Zealand. There's an Ajahn Chah, Western monk, leading a retreat like an hour from where I grew up. I went all the way. So I went to that and then moved into the monastery, which I also didn't know existed, Wimuti, which is 45 minutes from my hometown, which I spend a lot of time there now too. And at that time, Ajahn Siddhanto, Ajahn Yatuko, and Ajahn Jodipalo all had visits over, and each one said to me, "Oh, you should come and have a look at Abhayagiri." And I'm like, why would I do that? But they say when you ask 3 times, there's something about this 3 thing. So I was on my way to something else and thought I was calling in. And day 2, it was like I'd found my tribe. It was like I'd spent some time with Bhante Gunaratana in West Virginia. I'd spent time at Wimuti. but there was something about the incredible integration of the teachings within that lifestyle. And I can see familiar faces, and some people in this room have been there quite recently, and some are regular visitors. So when I left, and this is what I'm trying to get to, when I had to leave in 2018, because if I didn't, I would be no longer eligible for what we call the age pension. I think you call Social Security. And I'd done unpaid volunteer work, religious work for a long time. I couldn't take that risk. So the green card, which I'd been trying to get for 6 years, arrived in the post. And 2 days later, I was on the phone and found out I had to go back home. And the grief, the deep grief and discombobulation and disorientation that I felt going out of the gate and then having to find my way, I guess, in my own way, after being, very much in the fabric of that community and learning so much about, teaching. There's all of these lists. There's lots of lists and lots of concepts and lots of 84,000 teachings. But how do you live it? How do you actually embody it? How do you put it into place when this person drives me nuts? And I'm meant to be kind and patient, but I don't feel that right now. So so what I think could be useful here is just for me to speak about some of the teachings, some of the tools that I applied at that time, because it seems that I'm not from this country, but I do love this country, and there are times of change now and more to come. And that may make people feel many things, not everyone necessarily, but, a sense of anxiety, unpredictability, uncertainty in small or big ways. So I was at a public meeting both with Lumpur Viradamo and Lumpur Pasano, and they were asked questions about when we're feeling that way, when we're feeling a little shaken by something that's pretty big that we cannot do much about, or feel that we can't do much about. What would you say? What would you say? And as guidance, what could you offer? And for Lumpur Viradamo, he was, in all cases, the suggestion is, if you can, to not be too engaged in the news, that the news can be a source for some people, that, of bringing up more feelings that can be difficult to deal with. But for some people, I guess they need to stay in touch. But I just want to sort of pass on what these elders in our tradition, 50 years in the monastic tradition, both of them, and very wise and wonderful human beings. So he said, protect the mind. So, really attend to the mind and what we put food into the mouth every day, but we also put food into the mind and the heart. I don't like to make the separation, but heart, mind, chitta. So can we, as we may, if we're interested in health, be watching and mindful of what we're putting in our mouth for the body? Can we also attend very carefully to what we're feeding the mind? And this tradition puts a lot of emphasis on body awareness, of being in the body, of understanding when something happens, what the body response is to it. And and that was kind of new for me. I think I lived from the neck up quite a lot. So, but the body can tell you because if there's an event or a headline or something that occurs, if you grow the body awareness, the body can tell you, it's kind of a result. This doesn't feel so good, or it does, or this fills my heart, or this empties my, this makes me a bit shaky. And the body can be such a wonderful communicator. in the way that the mind can spin off and not be so reliable necessarily. I think the body can be a very steadying, balancing, calming, reliable and quiet refuge. My mind, anyway, if I've got something going on, can just, really spin off. So, so he was, Lumpur Viradamo saying, protect the mind, and what will you feed the mind? So he is very fond of some of the Sufi teachings and teachings of all of the heart energy, so like the Brahma Viharas. But there's many different recollections as well in this tradition, in the Dhamma tradition, but the Nusatis. So, my memories here were just a recollection of incredible generosity for you being here, but for this building, for your practice, for people, and I'm sure there's a lot of them, but Jessica clearly, who give so much of their time. So to reflect on generosity, your own generosity, what you can give or are giving in all ways, not necessarily at all financially, but and also the generosity that has gone before. So I used to orient people women at Abhayagiri, and I would always be saying, every inch of this, if you haven't been there now, there's a very large reception hall, another meditation hall, I think it's 25 cabins in the forest. There's a whole women's house, there's a lot there, and 300 acres, but every single inch of this only exists because of everyone that's gone before and what they wanted to give, and give for others, for themselves to come and be part of, but to give for others as well. And that whole tradition keeps on going. It's an economy of gift, which is very, very different in many ways to the economy in a Western modern sort of society. So recollections on that, we can, and it's linked into right effort. So right effort can be sometimes the effort for the unarisen to arise, but in a more simple way, for states, wholesome mind states, wholesome habits to be developing, and once they're developed, for them to be sustained. For unwholesome, unskillful, so, for example, the wholesome, so generosity, kindness, patience, all of the paramita, the loving kindness, wholesome, skillful states, and the unwholesome, the aversion, the irritation, the jealousy, the competition, the worry, the fear, for those to be decreasing, and to do anything that's possible to guard against them arising. So that is protect the mind, and the other nusati. So that's chaga nusati, generosity, reflecting on generosity, and in there I kind of add in kindness. You know what it feels like when someone's really kind. I had someone find me a place to live in New Zealand recently when it was too wet to be in the cabin in the monastery. I just happened upon this woman. She said, I'm going to find you a place to live. And she didn't know me at all. It's incredible kindness. So then saddha, faith. And I think faith, for me, the most beautiful translation, so faith, not necessarily, the Buddhist faith, although you could have that, or there are other religions, but as conviction, trust, confidence, in the teachings or meditation or however you may phrase it for yourself. But the most beautiful translation I've ever heard of that is to place the heart upon. What do I want to place the heart upon? And when I place the heart upon something, what are the results? So it's this wonderful, simple teaching from the Buddha about causality. When this happens, that happens. So when I find something like what I'm talking about, these nusatis, gratitude, kindness, the heart starts to feel full. I'm placing the heart upon something that, for me, in recollecting, is very dependable in taking me to a place of calm and groundedness. And so if there are circumstances that feel beyond our control, that are not calm and feel unsteady, how can I find steadiness in the unsteady? how can, and there's some beautiful quotes, I think, around, but you have to bear with me. I tend to talk about this and then that, but this is all related. The monks that are coming in December, one of the monks, so they're from Seattle, Clear Mountain, put together this little booklet called Wellbeing Cascading. And I didn't know it would come out in a booklet, but I'd been in touch with Ajahn Kovalo, who was at Abhayagiri when I had those years there, and he shared it online with me because it was part of his studies. And then I was in the library 2 days ago, and sitting in the bowl as you come out of the library, here's this book, and I'm like, ooh, wow. Because it is talking about, and I'm going to read it, but it is talking about there are the noble truths, and there is suffering, and we do need to understand our suffering and the causes of suffering on a very personal level. What makes me suffer, and what can I do about that for the cessation of suffering? But there also is what they're talking here about, and I'm going to read it. There is a whole series of practices like what I'm talking about, and we'll continue to say a bit more about, that fill us up, and that we can be really concentrating on. So that right effort I just read recently, and encourage anyone if they want to read. It's not like I might have done many years ago, oh yes, I want to feel grateful, so I'll go A to Z gratitude. Okay, A, for me, like Ajahns, B, the beauty of autumn or something. This right effort it's really zeal. It's really like when it's spoken, it's like exerts oneself, strengthens the mind, applies diligence and strives. It's like going for it. That's what the right effort is, but not necessarily in a tight. I love Luang Por Veeradarmo's. He said that it was when he was there, so we're going back to the early 70s with Ajahn Chah, he's like, I don't know what these other monks are going to do, but I'm going to get enlightened. And he's just, and there was a lot of will, it was a lot of force, it was very tight, and it didn't get results. So this effort is in a very, very focused, very, as much clarity as possible, but not tight and not that fighting kind of combating sort of effort. But so what they're talking about here is one of Luang Por Pasano's, what he's known for, one of the teachings he's known for, is written here, right on page 1. We often think, boy, when I get my concentration together, then I'm going to be happy. But the reality is the other way around. It's once you get your happiness together that the heart can be at ease. So what are these conditions that lead to well-being and happiness? The Buddha points to these in a sequence of shades of happiness, cultivating in samadhi, which I quite like the idea of samadhi, composure, settled mind, and liberation. So this whole study guide is about what they call the cascades, and I'll read you the beautiful poetic part of this. If you want to use that very diligent zeal exertion of right effort and very much concentrate on what you can bring up that is going to fill the heart, then you have a steadiness, a refuge, resources, a toolbox, approaches, attitudes, many, many things that can steady you in the midst of unsteadiness. So in the Upanishad Sutta, the Buddha describes the series, and the series is for one practicing wholesome habits, wholesome mind states, wholesome skills, a sense of well-being arises. Having a sense of well-being, joy arises. Having a joyful mind, one body relaxes. One having a relaxed body experiences happiness. For one who is happy, the heart becomes concentrated. So just in a really brief sentence, the happy mind is easily concentrated, which makes incredible sense, because why does the mind go off in places? Because we're trying to find peace, happiness, calm. But if you've got a mind that is happy, it doesn't want to go anywhere. It's totally fine being with itself, heart, mind, body, wherever it finds itself. And this thing about, say, peace and calm. What's a huge characteristic of peace and calm? Non-movement, stillness. And I don't have it with me, but one thing to be very careful of, I use my hand to symbolize the phone, because the phone is something that encourages enormous amount of movement. I don't see the phone as much as, and I forgot to say, these wonderful people who are attending that are not in the room, welcome and thank you for being here. But technology has these wonderful benefits, but it trains the mind in distraction and movement. So if peace and calm have a very strong characteristic of stillness, and then you've got this tendency to be doing, this is movement, this is a lot of movement, and it's training the mind to want to move and move. Oh, I might look at that. And I noticed it myself. I was in the monastery in Wamuti for a period of time in the winter. Then because it was so wet and the cabin was not coping with that, I moved offside, and then I had Wi-Fi. And I could see it myself. Oh, I'll just look up. I'm gardening. I need to know the weather. I'll just look that up. And then I'll come upon a headline. And, down, Lumpur Pasano says, down a rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. So it has many, many benefits, but, it's not necessarily going to help you a lot on the path. Except one of the Thai Ajahn says, what do you swipe for? If you're swiping for Dhamma, if you're swiping for wisdom, if you're swiping for anything that helps you open the heart, heartwarming, filling the heart, then, swipe away. But what do you swipe for? Yeah. So this wonderful definition here, or this wonderful, what the Buddha said, describing the cascading well-being. It's a series being akin to rainwater, flowing down along a mountain slope, filling up the creeks, filling up the pools, filling up the streams and rivers, and, when those are full, the great ocean. Inspired by this picturesque simile and based on its early pull of pamoja, I quite like pamoja, it's well-being, but like a buoyancy. When you're feeling pretty kind of perky and good, feels like you've got rubber in your shoes. Boom, boom, kind of bounce along. Inspired by this picturesque simile and based on its early pool of pamoja or well-being, we call this progression of positivity the well-being cascade. So I'm not wanting to say that it's all Pollyanna, rose-tinted. It's not at all. I'm simply wanting to bring to mind, because Lumpur is my teacher, and that is something that he speaks about, that the causes of happiness, the recollections, but also right effort. Whenever he's asked, how do I know if what I'm doing in meditation, in my life, and with the teachings or whatever, is moving in a good direction? And he would say, are wholesome states increasing and unwholesome states decreasing? And then I happened to ask him recently about what are other characteristics. And I asked him that about feeling that there are results. I really have results, progress, attainment. I just don't like that terminology, because it's kind of like getting, it's kind of goal-based. But how do we know that there's really wholesome and beneficial, supportive conditions increasing in my life because of what I'm doing? And I asked him that question because I've always been incredibly inspired by a story of Lumpur Sumedho. So Lumpur Sumedho, the very first Western, the big giant Western disciple who came in the late 60s to Ajahn Chah. And, he was the pioneer, and then some other Westerners like Lumpur Pasano and Lumpur Veradamo and Ajahn Amaro came along, and they were, doing very, very, very hard. They just were remembering how hard it was recently. Concrete floors, long talks in Thai, which they didn't understand, all kinds of creepy crawlies, malaria. Really, really hard conditions. And I've asked them in the past, okay, so it sounds really difficult. How come you stayed? And they will say, we knew that this man, Ajahn Chah, could lead us out of suffering. They had no doubt at all, and that's what they wanted. But the story that inspired me is he had been there. Luang Por was able to name it. He thought it was about 1974. Luang Por Sumedho had been there with the monks, and there were, numerous challenges, both within them and between the group, learning all of this. And he really wanted to go and do solitary practice. So he said to Ajahn Chah, he kept on, can I go, can I go? And finally, Ajahn Chah said, yes, you can go. And he found himself in India. I don't know, ideal solitude practice sort of situation. But it wasn't long before what happened. He was like, I should be helping Ajahn Chah. And Luang Por Pasano said it may have been just in response to this incredible gratitude, this understanding of what he had received, but he credits that as one of the major insights of his whole path. And me, as a kind of naive newbie, I would have thought major insight, isn't that some kind of spacious kind of like formless, like some, but no, it's this very, very grounded, simple, enormous upwelling of gratitude, where you want to katanu katawedi, which is the gratitude where you just want to give because you've received so much, and it comes from this immense fullness. And so he went back. So that generosity, that recognition that we all can use these practices, recollections, and that fullness of heart. And as it fills the heart, but also there is all of that suffering, and there is that we need to sit with moods and mind states and situations. We need to sit and be able to be aware and be with all of that as well. And what I'm talking about is that zeal to spend a lot of time and focus in what can fill up those pools and streams and in creeks and go to the ocean. That fullness of heart, because where do you let go from? Do you let go from emptiness? Do you let go from a state where, I feel like there's something kind of missing? That's not what you let go from. You let go because you're so full that you don't need any more. It's like the happy mind is easily concentrated. The full heart just wants to give, wants to serve, wants to sit, wants to know how to behave in a way that's kind, patient, generous, But I tell you, in a monastery, you're not always feeling like that. You're not always feeling like that at all. I mean, you're feeling opposite at times. So sure that, if they would listen to me, all of that would go a lot better. And why do they do it that way? And why don't they do it this way? And gosh, they throw a lot of compost out. And if you're really stupid, you'll let some of this out of your mouth. Not a good idea. I hadn't been there very long, and I was the female guest orienter. And I had to be in liaison with the guest monk, who will remain nameless. And he had decided in the 4-bedroom house that he would put this guest, he would put Mary in this room and Sally in that room. And I kind of knew Mary and Sally, and she wouldn't be good in that room because she doesn't have a good leg and she has to go up the stairs. So I'm sitting there getting really peeved. Why can't I, who know the women and how, why can't I make these? And so it grew and it grew and it got really quite strong. And I go knocking on the Ajahn door, bad idea. I go in there, and Luang Por's in there, Luang Por Pasano. Ajahn Yadika was a vice abbot. He's no longer a monk, but lovely human being. And Ajahn Dhamma, I'm like, not, this is. But I was so angry that I just, anyway, I'm going to do this. So I go in and he's right over by the desk, and I go right over in the corner and I kind of kneel down and and he looks at me. Not a movement, not a flinch, nothing. He just looks at me and he goes, why are you telling me this? Immediately I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm like, well, isn't there like some job description? I'd come from a corporate background, job description, and these are the tasks and so on. These are mine and these are him and his, and he's just, if you know him, he kind of, this little furrow in the broom. Well, you just have to work it out together. And I said to him, it felt like, because I talked to him about that, I've never done that again. I wouldn't advise anyone to do that. But I said it was like he was a reflector. He was like the vibe that I had didn't get anywhere near him. And it came back to me. It was like a boomerang. You know, we have these down under, these things that you can throw. It came back to me. And I walked out of the door, and it was like this rain thing. It just was like, it just completely disappeared. But I said to him later, like, what you did, it didn't, like, what I said in the whole really full-on fury that I had didn't touch anywhere near you. And he said, if you can do that, if you can bring yourself through training and reflections, and if you can do that for someone, that's the greatest gift. Because what happened is it just came back to me. I saw, I felt, I realized I was incredibly ashamed and embarrassed. And I walked out the door and it was gone. We just have to work it out. So there's another refrain. So the other, I easily get distracted because I enjoy hearing stories, so I quite like telling them. But so, I am getting back to this. So there's 5 baskets or 5 skills for reflection. So there's generosity, which seems to make incredible sense to me. And then saddha, placing the heart upon. And then there's the sila, so I loved hearing you take the precepts this morning. I mean, what an incredibly wise thing to do, to place a boundary around what I can and cannot do in order to bring a lot of attention to my actions, body, speech, and mind. And then learning and wisdom. So I highly recommend this, and you're really lucky that the author, the Buddha wrote, of course, a lot, but the person who put it all together with a lot of mentoring from Lumpur Basano will be here in December. And this is online. All you have to do is Google, I did it for a friend this morning, Cascading Wellbeing. And it's really, so because the other refrain in here that I really like, and I think is very good for this time right now, with all of the recollections and with this, very strong focus on developing the wholesome states, wholesome habits, wholesome mind states, and filling the heart, which also opens the heart, which I think we need a lot of right now. Compassion, empathy, being able to just be alongside maybe someone who is feeling unsteady, is feeling discombobulated, is feeling anxious, worried. So that, which is called the Pamoja, the cascading well-being, one engaging in that, such a disciple is called one who abides balanced amongst those who have taken a bumpy road, and one who abides friendly amongst the hostile. I'll say that again because it just seems so timely, doesn't it? It does to me. Such a disciple of the noble ones is called one who abides balanced amongst those who have taken a bumpy road, and one who abides friendly amongst the hostile. And that's a refrain all the way through this book. So there are the Anusatis as well for the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and I like to talk about them in a way that's perhaps, so, we do have the Buddha and the incredible journey, and so much has been passed on to us. And the Dhamma, the truth, the natural truths, impermanence, dissatisfaction, and the non-self nature of things. But we do have the Sangha, and on my little large grief journey from leaving Abhayagiri and having to figure out what next for myself, what I came to in they call it my tudong, so I tried hospital chaplaincy, and I had a gardening business, and I lived in the Wellington Monastery, but what I came to is what is most important for me, for this being, is you, is Kalyana Mita, is other people alongside, like-minded people. So at the monastery, what I love being there is that everyone that walks up the drive, I have something in common with. I don't know to what level or how much or what it is, but it's someone else who is wanting to find a way out of suffering, dissatisfaction, whatever, however you want to term that, and is willing to, take the time either as a day visit, or Portland Friends brought this wonderful group who was so immensely helpful at Katina to Abhayagiri. We just have so much in common, and we need each other. This is me. I don't know what you need, but that's what I need. Kalyanamita, spiritual companions. I used to think of, when I lived there, I still think of it actually, it's like this very, very, very broad road. And we're all, because the monks are pretty serious about the path. I'm pretty serious about the path. You probably, are too. We're all walking alongside each other. We do it different. We're different characters, temperaments, personalities. We have different moods. We have different tendencies. But we're all walking along in that direction, going together. And that together, I feel like, right now in this country, in the world, anywhere, but just be together. Be together doing this force of goodness, goodness arising and caring about others, watching out for others. You have this expression about back here. I don't know. Is it watching one's back or caring for one's back? I learned these Americanisms. I learned scratch the other day. I grew up making everything from scratch. So I'm like, what's scratch? This meal's made scratch. I feel that sometimes I spend so much time in the monastery that when I feel like a little child sometimes when I'm out. What's that? And, oh, look at that. And so, just, and I think let's get together. Let's really get together and be together, like-minded people. Margaret, I hope she doesn't mind, was showing me her parami cards, collage cards. And I thought, wouldn't that be a great thing, just a little group, and let's get together and really focus, really, how can we be together in this, in what is good, and what is wholesome, and what is peace, and what is companionship. Because it warms the heart and we don't feel so alone in times that may be a little unnerving. And I could go on and blah, blah, blah. And I'm artistic, so I don't go A, B, C. I go D, F, Z, B. But it's time to stop. So thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for your dedication in this way.